Hi, I'm Joe and welcome to the channel. In this video, I thought I would do something a little bit different. Actually, I think I'm going to kick off a new series called Tone Chasing, where I'm going to chase after the guitar tone that I hear either in a song or inspired by the artist and show you how I came up with that sound. You see, recently I put together an inspired by video. And in these inspired by videos, what I do is I put an original piece of music together, and then I break down each individual guitar part so you can see exactly what makes up that style of music. Well, in the recent one that I did on AC/DC, I realized I had no AC/DC sound, I had no Angus Young sound. So I thought it'd be interesting to document the process that I took to develop that sound and share it with you in hopes that you can use that information and create your own sounds as well. Now, if you're new to the channel and you find any value in this video whatsoever, would you please consider supporting the channel for free by subscribing down below and hitting the like button? It helps me out very much and I'm very grateful for that. Let's go ahead now and jump into behind the scenes of creating the Angus Young sound. So I'm really excited to be kicking off this series of videos where I'm basically going to do a little tone chasing. I'm not sure what I'm going to call it yet, either tone chasing or tone chaser, I'm not sure. But I thought I picked an easy one, folks, but I really didn't. This one was incredibly hard to do, and at the end of the day, I failed. I really didn't capture the Angus Young sound as I hoped I could. But I want to share you a little bit about the process that I took to get where I got. At the end of the day, I do feel like I still have a usable tone that I can use that does have the vibe, if you will, of AC/DC. Now, before I dump into the computer and I show you exactly what I did to put this together, I just wanted to share some, obviously, observations. In doing this, you have to realize that you have a couple of disadvantages. And the first big one is that I don't have the hands of Angus Young. None of us do, right? They only belong to him, and I doubt he'd let us borrow them. But a lot of the tone comes from someone's hands, and he has just such an incredible touch of the instrument that it definitely comes through. So the only thing you can basically do when you're faced with this, obviously, is try to mimic the player as best you can. Mimic the aggressiveness of how maybe they dig into a note, or their vibrato as another example. I noticed a lot in the older AC/DC songs when I was researching this and watching some live videos, maybe from like 1979. He did a lot of things that he's doing is downstrokes. There's not too many upstrokes happening. Notice how they're hitting the strings. Where they're hitting the strings also is going to affect the tone as well. And also do your research. See what kind of picks that they're using. He's using most likely a heavy pick is what I've been reading. So I got one of those. Another one is someone's vibrato. You can maybe pick up on how wide or how fast that they're moving the notes when they're doing any soloings. So these things can help you, mimic the player. At the end of the day, though, we want to have our own identity on the instrument, but it's always great to try to, borrow from the best and then morph it into your own. Another big disadvantage that I have is clearly this is not an SG guitar. So I don't have one, and I really thought that this might have been a great excuse to jump on reverb.com and order one, but I didn't go that far. I do have a Thornbucker, though, humbucker, which is based off of a 50s PAF, a patent applied for pickup, and this is obviously Pete Thorne's signature humbucker, and it's great. It's great. So it kind of gets you kind of in the ballpark. And again, with all of this, I can't expect to get the exact same sound that would be on a record. And in this case here, I chose Highway to Hell as my kind of guitar sound that I was chasing after. And there's obviously the main factors, again, I don't have his hands, I don't have the guitar, I also don't have all the other equipment that he has, right? And I'm also not in the same environment. You have to remember when you're listening to a song on an album, you're actually listening to a produced track. So really, we're not even hearing necessarily Angus's sound if we were just sitting in the room with him and listening to his guitar amp. Yes, it's very close, it captures that, but there's also production techniques and things that are happening that they're layering on top of that, such as, EQ or compression and things of that nature. So I did try to incorporate that when I was creating this sound as well, and I'll show you when we jump into the computer and I show you a little bit about the HX STOMP interface where I did that as well. So again, because of these factors, we can't say that we're going to 100% replicate the exact sound, but it was a lot of fun trying, and I do think I got close. I would love to hear your comments below if you think I was totally off and my ears were deceiving me. Let's go ahead and jump into the computer, and I'll show you some research that I've done to get to this sound, and also using the HX STOMP. And again, just to preface this, I just want to say, just because I'm using the HX STOMP doesn't mean that you don't have the opportunity to do this with whatever equipment that you have at home, be it your own amp and some pedals, or if you maybe have some emulating software inside of your DAW that kind of mimics different guitar amps. To me, that's the power of some of this modeling thing, is that it allows us to explore and get different sounds than what we traditionally have with maybe just one amp. So I'll show you some of the steps that I took, obviously, that you can follow as well, regardless of what kind of equipment that you have to try to chase after a tone. Let's go ahead now and go tone chasing. Okay, before I get to the grand reveal, 2 things real quick. First of all, I'm sorry I don't have one of those fancy boom mics that you usually see when people do these. The good old Shure 57 wins every time, folks. Number 2, I just thought I would share with you my process that I took to get to the tone that I got, in hopes that, if you never did this before, sharing the steps that I took might help you and jumpstart you on your own path to doing your little tone chasing for yourself. Also, this is my first time doing this, so if you have any other comments or thoughts, and if you've done this before, please share your knowledge in the comments below and let us know other steps and things that we can do that might make this more helpful. I tell you what, it was a very interesting and challenging but fun project to try to do this. Alright, so step number 1 that I took, obviously, was to locate a guitar tone that I wanted to emulate. And as I mentioned, this is Highway to Hell by AC/DC. So why I chose this was a little bit of make it a little bit easier for myself. We know the song starts off with just guitar, so I have basically an isolated guitar track, which is helpful. Now, if the song that you're going for and the tone that you're going for doesn't have that, just try to maybe find a section of the song where the guitar is more predominant, where it's maybe sitting out there so you can listen to it. Or, with all the things that are happening with isolated tracks on YouTube, maybe you could find something on there too to help you. But that's kind of the step that I first took, was find a track that I could do. So let's go ahead and give this a listen and see where we're at as far as tone goes. And because I'm new to YouTube, forgive me, I'm just going to do the A chord, the first chord, because I'm still a little nervous about all this copyright things and all that fun stuff. So just to be safe, I'm just going to play the A chord. And let's hear what tone Angus has. So when you do this, take note of a couple things, like what do you hear? The first thing that I hear, obviously, it's a very mid-range focused guitar. Number 2 is I hear plate reverb. I hear a reverb on here, and I'm pretty sure it's a plate reverb. I know this song was kind of recorded in the 70s, and I know that the gear that they had back then most likely was plate reverbs that was being used on there. I'm pretty sure, because I know, we'll get to it later, but I know the amp that Angus was using did not have natural built-in reverb, so there was some studio stuff happening here. And the other thing that I noticed too is you could see here that the guitar is panned more to the right. So let me show you the VU meters here. You can see on the right-hand side it's coming up, and on the left-hand side it's lower. So we know we're dealing with a pan guitar. Now, why am I mentioning all that? Well, I think it's important to do the tone comparison that you're trying to work on and kind of come through the same audio interface when you're doing it. So what I'm going to do in a little bit is we're going to have the HX STOMP hooked up through the computer as well and listening through it through Logic through my same audio setup. And the reason for that is having that same audio reference is very important, I think. So I think it would make it a little more challenging if I was listening to the song, let's say, on the computer, but then I was using like an amp and I was trying to dial things in. That sound's going to be different because it's not coming through the same audio components, if that makes sense. I think it just kind of, if you can, try to run everything through the same audio device, so you're kind of making sure that both sources, the original source and the one that you're working on, is coming through the same way. All right, so that's step number 1. Okay, step 2 is a great and fun step. It's research, and be careful if you have gas like I do, which is gear acquisition syndrome, because this could be very deadly. You find all this cool gear, and you're like, oh, it'd be nice if I had that. But step 2 is research. Go on Google. There's so many great articles and things that people are writing that might help you and jumpstart you on your path to doing a little tone chasing. Find articles. This was great. I was able to find articles from the tracking engineer who was at the session, which is fantastic. There's also wonderful things on YouTube like rig rundowns. here we can get a clear snapshot of Angus's amp, and that's kind of gives us a starting point of the settings that we might want to, start with when we're trying to emulate this tone. So things to also look out for is obviously the obvious stuff, right? What kind of amp was he using? Well, it was a Marshall 5900 watt super plexi, lead plexi amp. But make note also of the cabinet. What kind of cabs was he using, and what kind of speakers in those? A lot of the modeling software has all of these options available to you. Make note also of the guitar. Make also note of the microphones that were used to record this. So we see these were U67s were used to record these. Make note of all these things, because every piece that you can put together when you're crafting that sound will help all this research that you're doing. We also see they keep talking about the wireless transmitter. I guess he had one of the first kind of wireless systems, and apparently he liked the way that it interacted with the amp. There's a little bit of debate, though, if he actually used it for rhythm or just lead work. Like we can see here in this Sweetwater article that it says Angus used the radio transmitter when doing the solos. So we don't know. Was it used for just the lead work? Was it used also for the rhythm? We don't know. One thing of interest, though, is when you do and look at the rig rundown, Angus is clearly using this device which emulates that transmitter. And so, in my opinion, he likes it. It's adding to his tone. So if we can incorporate that into our tone chasing, let's try to do that. Now, obviously, this thing's like $1,300, and I don't have that here. So what I try to do is, well, what's kind of the next best thing? And for me, I was thinking, well, maybe it was a boost pedal. We do know a lot of people that use Marshall amps would use a treble boost. So I kind of put a boost pedal on there, but with very low settings to try to bring back a little bit of that treble. I was thinking that that radio transmitter might have been bringing back some treble into his tone, and that's what he liked about it. So we have that. Also, make note of other little tidbits of information that you might glean from it. In this article here, they were talking about how they really liked the room sound. Now, why am I mentioning that? Let's see where I can find that. Yeah, so right in here it says, for the mix of Highway to Hell, Platt fed the guitar into a studio room in order to give it a roomy feel. We'll make note of that because in the emulation software, like in a Stomp, we can have a room reverb on top of the plate reverb that we talked about. So make note of all these things, make a list of them, and put them where you can see them when you start crafting the actual sound in the device we're going to do. So research was step 2. Okay, here we are. We're on step 3. We're actually going to jump in and we're going to start to work with our modeling software if you're using that, or if you're using a real amp and some pedals. Just make sure, again, that let's say you're listening to the source file in Logic, let's say, go ahead and mic up your amp and bring that through Logic as well, so you can use the same audio interface to A/B between the two tones. But in this case here, I'm using Line 6 Stomp again, and I went and I actually pulled up the manual. Well, why would I do that? Well, I have my list, right, of all the things that I found during my research. And so let's start looking. Let's see what we have at our disposal in our software, in this case, that we can help emulate this sound. Let's see how close we can get just by, basically making a shopping list here. So I can see here that, remember that he used a super lead. Well, lo and behold, we have a super lead. There actually is 3 of them. There's a normal channel, bright channel, and a jump channel. And looking again at my research, looking at the rig rundown, I see that he was plugged into the bright channel. So we're going to go ahead and use that. And just look through what you have at your disposal. Remember, we talked about he had a 412 cabinet with some greenbacks in it. So there we go. We have that as well. What microphone again? He used on the microphone, they used a U67. Well, great. I have one of those too at my disposal. So go ahead and go through this and see again what you can take inventory of. And so when you jump into the software, you kind of know where you want to start from. So let's go ahead and pull up the HX Stomp edit software. And this is great, right? I went ahead and I selected the bright channel like we talked about. I got the greenback speakers happening, the 4x12, and look, I used a 67. Now, there's other things that I added to this, so let's go ahead and look at the signal chain. I started with a boost. Well, why did I do that? Well, I know that we know, or we have an idea, that he's probably was using that radio transmitter, his wireless system, and most likely I was thinking that was kind of might be bringing back some treble into his sound. So I kind of just used a very light boost for that. And basically I was just trying to get it to make things brighter, again, to bring that treble back. I have 2 EQs, which might look a little odd, but we have to remember, again, we're listening to a produced track. So it's not like Angus, if he was sitting in the room with us and he was playing his rig, it wouldn't sound like we hear on the recording, because the recording is produced. So with the 2 EQs, I was trying to fine tune and dial in where I thought they were kind of bumping things up in the mid-range area and things of that nature. Another weird thing you might notice is, wow, you got 2 reverbs. Why would you do that? Well, we remember from the source file we were listening to, there was definitely a plate reverb happening on there. So I have that plate reverb. And we remember from our research, too, that they were bringing in a room sound to kind of bring things, to make things fuller and bring things to life. So that's the second reverb. I went ahead and used a room reverb. And the last thing I did was I added a compressor. And you'll be like, yo, Joe, I'm sure that Angus wasn't playing with a compressor. I mean, his amp was cranked and it was compressing itself. And that's true. But again, since it was a produced track, I'm going to assume that they might have put on a compressor on there just to give a little more pumping sound to the guitar itself. So I went ahead and used I think it's an 1176 model and they call it the LA Studio compressor. So that's kind of my signal chain. It's still kind of simple, really, and as far as there's not a lot of pedals and things going on here. It's just basically an amp and a cabinet and a little bit of a boost. But the other things that I'm doing, again, are trying to make the difference up between having the raw amp sound and then, again, the produced sound that you're hearing in the track. So let's go ahead and grab a guitar now, and I'll turn these things on and off so we can see how the sound progressed. Okay, let's go ahead and start with just the bass sound. This will just be the amp and the cab. So it's a little flat, as we can see. No, not much life to it, not like the recording at least. So let's go ahead and add in the boost that I put on. And again, this was to simulate the wireless system that it uses. Let's see what this does. So we can see this is bringing a little bit of life into the sound, at least picking up the treble side. And let's go ahead and engage the 2 EQs. Let's see what this sounds like. Okay, we can see now that the mid-range is coming up more. It's getting a little more lively. Let's go ahead and add in the plate reverb. So now we can see we're getting a little bit closer. We're getting more lively of a sound. Now, what I really like to do, and which was a great learning experience through this whole process, was add in that room. That room reverb really just adds like a 3-dimensional thing to the whole sound. It's really nice. So to me, it's getting fuller. It's getting really full, but there's no oomph to it. There's like no little something pushing it. So that's where I think the compression will come in. So let's add the compressor. And now let's give the whole signal chain a listen. So we've really come a long way. Just to prove that, I'm just going to go back to the amp and cab, and then I'll go back to everything turned on, and we can see where we started from and where we ended up. So we really come a long way with this sound. So that's what it sounds like on its own, but the true test is, what does it sound like next to the source file? Okay, the big grand reveal. So let's go back to listening to the original version. And now let's go ahead and listen to my tone. And I did do the same panning. So you watch the view meters. And I also tried to play with the same emphasis that Angus has. You know, that's a lot of it too. Like when you're emulating the player, try to play like him. Now, again, I know I already spoiled it in the beginning of this video. I got close, but it's definitely not the same. Here we go. Angus. My futile attempt. So we're in the ballpark. I mean, it's not there 100%, but it's in the ballpark. And when I watch the meters here, you know, I can see that there's some frequencies that I'm just not getting. But it's close. I mean, what's nice is, I mean, it's a really nice sound when you're just playing with it by yourself and also recording with it. It really works well. It's got a nice punch to it, but clearly, obviously, I don't have a real amp. I'm not using a real amp. This is all emulated, so that might have something to do with it. Again, we know I don't have the same guitar, but I did get in the ballpark, I think. Let me know in the comments below how you thought I did. If you also hear or see something that I did that was a little off, please give me some advice. I would really welcome that. Again, this is my first attempt to do a tone chasing video, and I'm pretty pleased with the results. I could sit here and do this for hours. I have to tell you, the ear fatigue of doing this is just amazing. You really have to step away every now and then because your ear just starts to fool yourself. Like after I listen to it for a while, I go back to listen to it. I'm thinking, oh, that sounds exactly the same. And then I'll go away for a while and I'll come back and I'll play. I'm like, wow, that's not even close. So that's something to be mindful of if you're doing this and you're doing a little tone chasing. Give your ear a break. The ear fatigue is real, and your brain will start tricking you into it. And also, make sure that you try to match the levels. You notice here, you know, he was peaking at 0 on that last push, and so I try to make sure that I level match too. Because if something's played louder, your ear is going to perceive it as better for some odd reason. It's just a weird thing that happens. So ear fatigue is real. Make sure you level it out when you're going back and forth and A-Bing, just to make sure that the things are at, you know, the reasonably the same volume, so you're not really tricking your ear from that standpoint either. Anyway, that's it. Again, a usable tone. I'll put a link to it in the description below, but I definitely did not win this tone chase for sure. I did not catch Angus Young. Well, that's a wrap for the first video in the tone chasing series. I hope that you found it interesting and found some value in it. And if you did, please do me a favor and consider supporting the channel for free by subscribing down below, hit the like button, and knock on the bell, and you'll be notified when the next video comes out. I'm very appreciative of your support and grateful that you watched. As always, I wish you a great day.